Lag BaOmer is the great day of the Tana HaKodosh Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. 1,052 times we hear the voice of Rabbi Shimon in Shas Bavli. Many times it says Rabbi Shimon, and even though it doesn't say Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that's Rabbi Shimon. We learned it in Psachim Nun Aleph Amud Beis and other places. About 200 years ago, Reb Moshe Kunitz of Uben wrote a sefer called Ben Yochai, and he writes a very surprising statement there. Many times we find Reb Shimon mentioned as such, Reb Shimon, but many times we find Reb Shimon with his father's name, Bar Yochai or Ben Yochai. That's a very rare phenomenon because most Tanaim and Amoraim are just mentioned either with their name alone or with the name of their father to make sure that to distinguish them from other people who have a similar name. But for the same person to sometimes be mentioned by his own name and sometimes with his father's name, that's a very rare phenomenon. We find in many places in Shas that Reb Shimon was on a different level than anyone else. Reb Pinchas ben Yair would ask a question, Reb Shimon would answer him 24 different answers. In Sukkah Mem Hei Amud Beis, Reb Shimon says, Ra'isi b'nei aliyah vehem amuatim. There's very few people up there. He's on a high level. Masechet Shabbos Daf Lamed Gimel, we find a great Maaseh with Reb Shimon hiding in the cave, and he would look at things and he would just burn them and turn them into a rubble of bones. We find in Yerushalmi and Brachos, in Ksubis Amezayin, in the days of Rashbi, the rainbow was not to be found. More other great things we learn about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and yet, in most machloikes that he is a party to the machloikes, we don't paskin like Reb Shimon. We learn in Eruvin Memvav Amud Beis, Reb Shimon and Reb Yosi, halacha follows Reb Yosi. Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda argue, halacha follows Reb Yehuda. The Maharshal in his Shalos HaTshuvos, Simin Tzadiches, writes, even if Reb Shimon would stand here in front of us and would yell, change this minhag, we wouldn't listen to him, because in most machloikes, in most of his things, we do not follow him la halacha. Very surprising. And based on this, Reb Moshe Kunitz in his Sefer Ben Yochai writes that there's two different Reb Shimons. Two different Reb Shimon. Not two different people. It's the same person. It's Reb Shimon, and then there's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And this refers to two different times in his life. Before he goes into the cave, he is just called Reb Shimon. When he comes out of the cave, he is now called Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. There's many examples to that, but even in the Maaseh about the cave, in the beginning of the Maaseh, it says Reb Yehuda and Reb Yosi and Reb Shimon were sitting together. That's when he comes into the cave. When he's in the cave and they wanted to tell him, the king died, there's no more dangers, you can come out. It says, who is going to tell this to Bar Yochai? He's not called Reb Shimon anymore, he's called Bar Yochai. When he paskins halacha, when he comes out of the cave, now he is called Tiher ben Yochai es beis hakavaros. Ben Yochai purified the cemetery. But about the time that he was born, in Makos Yud Zayin Amud Beis, it says Reb Shimon. But in Ksubis Zayin Amud Beis, when he dies, he is called Rashbi, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. In Maseches Meila, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, it says Yelech Rashbi lefanenu. Let Rashbi, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, go in front of us because Shehu melumad benisim. Rashi explains miracles have been performed to him in the cave. So what is the distinction between Reb Shimon and Reb Shimon ben Yochai? It's not just at different times in his life. It's the fact that when he was in the cave, he became on such a high level. Secrets of Torah were revealed to him. He became a Kadosh Elyon, as we sing about him in Bar Yochai Nimshach Ta'ashecha, in the famous song. So only in the halachos that he paskined as a Reb Shimon, in the first stage of his life, we don't follow him. But the halachos that were paskined by him after he's called Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, this rule that we don't paskin like him doesn't apply. And using this, we can understand what seems to be a very, very, very strange thing in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Daled Amud Aleph. The Gemara brings the words of Reb Shimon, and then the Gemara adds, and so too Reb Shimon Bar Yochai would say. If it's the same person, what does that mean? Especially if you don't add anything. Rabbi Akiva Eiger already alludes to this in Gilyon Hashas over there. But based on what we said until now, it's understood. As Reb Shimon Bar Yochai comes, and he gives a little more credit because it's in a later stage in his life than when he was just a Reb Shimon. So now it gives a little more validity to what he said when he was a little younger as a Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, 1,052 times we find Reb Shimon Bar Yochai in Shas Bavli.